Hello, BookTube. It's the long Memorial Day weekend here in the United States. It's the unofficial start of the season of summer. And in only a few days, June will be here. June is just a few days away. It's going to be a nice, warm, sunny day today. The temperature is still going to persistently dip up and down for the next week or two until warm weather gets here and simply settles in and stays. But I have a number of rituals that I do at the end of every month. One of them is work related. I have a bookcase that's entirely devoted to print review copies of books. I organize them by month, and then the top shelf is the current month, and that I organize by not only month but also release date. And I organize all these things and take care of them. I update them. I just shove things on there during the month. But as the month is ticking over to change, that's when I go over there with a stool and sit there and actually pore over everything. And I don't mean to make it sound like a mammoth assignment. It's really not. Once upon a time, before COVID, it was. Before COVID, it was piles and piles and piles of books. Now I get a lot of those things in electronic form. But I'm still going to be spending the next few days hovering over that and fussing with it. And another ritual that I'll have in common with all the rest of you is that I look ahead to the upcoming month and think about my TBR. I think about what I'm going to be reading in that month. And now for me, it's mostly going to be new releases in the American book market in the 15 or 16 genres that I find interesting. I like to read what comes out in those genres, not dip into one or two, but read everything that comes out in those genres. I can't do it any more than anyone could, but I try my best to come close. And so I'm looking at June and I'm making exhaustive lists of things that I need to read, things that I need to reread. I've read quite a few June releases already. Things that might be out there. And I thought, well, why not make another TBR video for June and share it all with you, just in case some of these are as interesting to you as they are to me. So we'll look at a few books that I'm going to be reading in the next few weeks. The first one is by David Purnell, and it is Belisarius and Antonina. It's subtitled Love and War in the Age of Justinian. And this is the story of the Roman Emperor Justinian's greatest general, the General Belisarius, and his wife, who often went with him on campaign. He looks careworn, doesn't he? even in a mosaic from 1,000 years ago, he looks careworn. He's a fascinating figure, and your mind just boggles at what he might have been able to accomplish if he had the raw materials. He didn't, by and large, have the raw materials. He was trying desperately at the behest of his Emperor Justinian to reclaim lost Roman territory. It was never going to be possible without infrastructure, and both Justinian and Belisarius knew they didn't have the infrastructure. But Belisarius was a genuine tactical and strategic genius. The last one that Rome fielded, with the possible exception of a fellow general of his own at the same time. And when you realize that, when you read his campaigns, fortunately we have, thanks to Procopius, we have a gigantically exhaustive account of his military campaigns that survives virtually unscathed by time. So we know a lot about them. And when you read them, you cannot help but get the impression that this guy was amazing, that he had some sort of a natural aptitude for this. And this is a new book devoted to him and his wife and their relations with the imperial couple. This was very much an age where two couples ruled everything. There was Justinian and Antonina, and there was also there was Justinian and his wife Theodora, and there was his general and his general's wife. And I know this subject really well. I've written and rewritten and rewritten and compulsively rewritten a novel about these people that required a lot of research before I even felt comfortable starting. And like everybody else, once upon a time, 50 years ago, I read Count Belisarius by Robert Graves. But new histories on the subject, always interested. This next one is by David Gamble. I have my doubts about it, but I can't not read it. This is called Idea City. It's a new history of contemporary Boston. And the subtitle is what gives me my qualms. I don't know anything about the book. The subtitle is How to Make Boston a More Livable, Equitable, and Resilient. And I wouldn't care at all. It would be the white noise of a subtitle, except for that word equitable, which it is, of course, in its strict dictionary definition, it is, of course, a good thing. It's a thing we all want. But in the 21st century, it has been completely co-opted for political reasons and means racist. If you're in a corporation and you have an equity officer, it means you have an officer whose job it is to implement institutional racism. Under the ideological assumption, the purely religious assumption, that you cannot be racist against white people. Racism has a definition. It has nothing to do with the target skin color. It's not like you can say there's one group that's exempt. If you do that, you are using the rationale that every racist has ever used, the same one that they've all used. So I know that's a lot of quibbling to hang on one word. Probably I should just ignore it and dive into this book. Oh, I will dive into this book with a wide open mind, but that word bothers me. That word, like I said, on the surface, in the dictionary sense of the word, it's of course a good thing that we all want to be true. We all want equitable workplaces, city parks, public pools, school systems. We all want those things to be equitable. It's just that, like so many other things in the 21st century, it also has taken on an online meaning that isn't its dictionary definition, and that betokens fanaticism. Hateful, bigoted, scorched earth fanaticism. Just like that innocent word from the South, y'all. It's indelibly tainted in the 21st century. Same thing here. I'm going to hope that I'm imagining things. I'm going to hope that I'm seeing boogeymen where they don't exist and just read it. There's a new book on Boston. Of course I'm going to read it. Then this next one is by Florence Gold, and it's called The Illegitimate Sun. Very pretty cover there. This is a self-published work. Work of Jane Austen fiction. Pride and Prejudice pastiche fiction. This one, I think, if I remember correctly, taking place after Mr. Darcy's proposal to Elizabeth Bennet, where she goes to the city, to the gardeners, confused in her mind and in her soul. And this is about the nephew of Mrs. Gardiner. So it'll be tenuous, and I don't know how much of a role either Mrs. Gardiner, who I think is absolutely fascinating. I think she's one of the most fascinating, mysterious characters in Pride and Prejudice, or Elizabeth Bennet herself. I don't know how much any of them will take part in this book. And I don't know, with Jane Austen pastiche fiction, if you don't know anything about it, if you haven't picked it up yet, you'll often wonder, well, okay, are you going to try to mimic Austen's writing style? Or her humor? Or are you just going to move her characters around without doing any of the stylistic stuff that is a huge reason why people love her? What are you going to do? I'm not saying that you should try to imitate the stylistic stuff, because most of the time when Jane Austen pastiche fiction writers do that, they fail embarrassingly. And there's a huge, huge industry for these books. There are dozens or even hundreds a month, every month, of just Pride and Prejudice variations, Jane Austen variations of one kind or another. This one is well designed, and I don't ever get to all of it. I cannot possibly get to all of it. But I try to get to some of it. It mystifies me. It confuses and intrigues me why Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice pastiche fiction is so incredibly popular. I imagine it being like if there were 10 books, 10 self-published books every month on just one Star Trek episode. So not Star Trek pastiche fiction, just a variation on the theme of one episode. So we will see. Then this next one is by Akutagawa, the great author of Rashomon. This is a new reprint. I forget who, I don't think I have it here, who does this translation and who produces this. This is called Kappa, which was Akutagawa's last novel-length thing. It's a short thing about a madman in an insane asylum who is taken down into the mystical realm of the Japanese folkloric being, the Kappa. And it's sort of billed, the book is sort of billed as a quasi Alice in Wonderland type thing, where the madman is not mad and goes to this mystical kingdom where the Kappa and all of the Kappa's fellow mystical creatures live, and starts to see that weird folkloric other world is very similar in some of its seedy aspects to the real world that has consigned this man to the madhouse. So we will see. We will see. It'll be weird, but I love this author. Absolutely love this author. So, and there's a new collection of this author's short fiction with a new translation, new cover, new design, and everything coming out soon as well. Then we have some Tudor history. You can't go wrong with a work of serious Tudor history. This is by Stephen Gunn, and it is Henry VII's New Men and the Making of Tudor England. I want to point out again that that is actually a subtitle. That is what a subtitle sounds like, especially in 2023. What you really want is to give this book a name. But it's probably a thoroughly academic work. It probably isn't ever even trying to have a general readership. But this is about the founder of the Tudor dynasty and the men that he employed to run his government, to staff and administer his hugely increasing bureaucratic state. Henry VII created a bureaucratic state for a number of reasons. One of those reasons, the one that tends to get the largest amount of attention in his biographies, is for money. The bigger and more elaborate and more controlled your bureaucratic state is, the more money you can corkscrew out of your populace. But there was another reason. And the other reason why Henry VII increased the bureaucracy so enormously is also why he staffed it with so-called new men. In other words, men who did not have aristocratic or landed gentry ties to the kingdom going back to William the Conqueror. And that was because Henry VII was a usurper. He took the crown by force. So he couldn't rely on old men, any one of whom would have secretly thought or said in their cups back in their country house that they have a better claim to the throne than he does. He was acutely aware of that, acutely aware of that kind of resentment brooding in his country, which for a long time, and maybe even now, doesn't like new men. So he staffed a lot of his government and also some of his council with new men, an almost unheard of thing to the extent that he did it. And this book looks at those people, not just the famous ones. There were two new men installed as rapacious tax collectors by Henry VII who were so unpopular, even amidst the ranks of other tax collectors. They were so unpopular that one of the first things that young Henry VIII did when he took the throne was have them killed, so that to the cheers of everyone in the country. They are the most famous two, but there are lots of others. This, I hope, will be at least very detailed. I am not hoping that it will be narratively good. Unfortunately, it just seems like too academic a work. It seems like this will just be... Oh. That's a foreboding face back there. Huh? Hey, baby. Huh? What's the baby? Oh. We're getting ready to go for a stroll before the heat of the day settles in. It's going to be 90 degrees here. She is not going to handle that well, so we're going to try and get our activity done. Have you been sleeping up there, baby? Huh? Are you sleeping up there? You don't want to admit it, do you? Sometimes she sleeps on her little bed perch instead of surveying her kingdom. It was really funny this morning. This morning on our morning walk, we came across two dogs they're adorable. They're neighbors of ours, and they know the situation so well that when they see us coming up the sidewalk, they both run straight to me. They just run right. In this case, there were two of them. They ran around Frida on either side while she just stood there. They didn't even pause to say hi to her. They just ran straight to me. Anyway, the next book we're going to look at is also Tudor fiction. This is by Dawn Matzat, and it is Catherine Parr. It's a new biography of Catherine Parr, the sixth and final wife of Henry VIII, the one who survived him in his deathbed. It took care of him, reunited his family. Very, very tricky situation to be in. Henry, at the end of his life, was extremely touchy and very emotionally unstable. Oh, we're not getting any Frida yoga at all. Oh, goodness. Catherine Parr came into that world and had an agenda of her own. She was a religious reformer, an intellectual, the first woman to publish a book under her own name in English. And this new biography, as you can see from the subtitle there, the author wants to stress that those things have often been put forward as the reason why she wanted the job. She was in love with another man. She wasn't in love with Henry. And she couldn't make love to Henry. There was no physical element to their relationship, aside from her changing the bandages on a pussy leg. Aside from that, there was nothing at all. And she was very much sexually in love with another man. Nevertheless, she took the job, and biographers have usually said that there were a whole bunch of reasons, both familial and ideological. This author is claiming that she liked to be queen, that she liked the fine things in life, that she was, in other words, in addition to all of those things, an opportunist. So, a new reading of Catherine Parr, a figure I really, really love reading about. So, fantastic. That's fine by me. Then this next one is rather odd. This is a rather odd thing. It's a new translation of a work of very slim collection of things. This is going from 1778 to 1807. This is a type of literature that flourished in the Edo period in Japan that was called kibyōshi. The book it's translated by Adam Cabot, and it's called The River Imp and the Stinky Jewel and Other Tales. And this is monster comics from the Edo period of Japan. And kibyōshi was a printed page that had words but also pictures. And both progressed the story. It wasn't that it was a woodcut or an etching or a sketch or whatever that illustrated something that was happening in the story, and then, 2 chapters later you might get another illustration, as was popular in books in the West during this time. Instead, in addition to the prose advancing the story, the pictures also tell the story. So if you remove the prose, you could probably figure out what was going on from the pictures, because the pictures occurred on every page. Whereas in, like, for instance, a very old illustrated edition of Tom Jones, if you remove the prose and just have the 6 pictures, you'd have no idea what was going on in the book. And kibyōshi is widely regarded as sort of a precursor to manga, an obvious precursor to manga and to comic books. This wedding of text and pictures. So I'm kind of waiting on an e-file. I'm kind of waiting on the print copy of this thing. I think that's the only way that will make it do justice. And this is only a tiny fraction. This is only, 30 years, 40 years of these things. There were lots and lots of others. This is I hope, the first step towards getting a lot of this stuff into, I was going to say a popular audience, but I don't think this is a popular audience. It doesn't say on the cover, but I think this is a fairly pricey university text. I still want a copy anyway, because I think this is absolutely fascinating. Then we have a biography. This is a partial biography. You'll get the whole of the subject's life story. This is meant to concentrate on one period. This is by Robert Garnett, and it is The Trials of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Taking Things Hard. There's our author just sitting there on the wall. And this, if I remember correctly, this book deals with The Great Gatsby and its aftermath. The Great Gatsby was written with much toil by Fitzgerald and then foisted onto the world. It was a gigantic event. It was a huge thing. It was known almost from the beginning that this was probably a major American novel. And after it, Fitzgerald suffered all the ills that a writer usually suffers when they have a book like that. It took him years to write another novel. And this is when he went out to Hollywood and sold his pen for rights or rewrites, seldom getting anything out of it except money, and slowly killing himself in a house that he really couldn't afford. And biographers, probably this biographer as well, will concentrate on the drinking. There was a huge amount of drinking, and biographers like to concentrate on that because they like to associate alcohol with creativity. Even if they're not renouncing it, they love to do that. But every visitor to Fitzgerald during this period of his life always came away with the same impression. All of them did, even when they weren't together. They came away with the same impression, which was, the drinking's pretty bad, even at 11 in the morning, but it's the smoking that's the real noticeable thing. It's the smoking that's going to kill him. In this particular case, those two habits were in a neck-and-neck fight to kill this person. But I think this book is going to make a strong case that this person was already close to dead anyway, creatively, internally. I just wonder, with books like this, whether they're a collection of letters or the introduction to an anthology of stories that Fitzgerald wrote during this period to keep the lights on. He wrote feverishly during all of this time. In those collections and those biographies, usually the writer will try to offer a road not taken. Okay, this is what happened to Fitz. This is why it took him so long to write another novel. This is why he felt so at dead ends creatively. but what could he have done that might have made things different? And most of those writers, unfortunately, take a moralizing tone and say, well, the alcohol would have to go, or it'd have to be in moderation. The amount of drinking here, there's no way that you could have a productive career with this much drinking, ignoring the fact that, The Great Gatsby was written under those conditions. Some of them will also say, well, he shouldn't have gone to Hollywood. Well, but how strong a moral fiber do they have to pass up the amount of money that he was being offered to go to Hollywood, the amount of money he was sure he could make there? I don't know. I'll be very interested to see. I think this figure is fascinating anyway. I'll be very interested to see what this biographer does with it. Then this next one, we'll finish up with, I honestly don't know what to call this. Is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it a weird blend of the two? Is it something new? I don't have any idea. This is the great Michael Moorcock, and this is his follow-up in The Sanctuary of the White Friars. This is his follow-up to The Whispering Swarm. This is The Woods of Arcady, that Dom cover that comes out in June. And this is one, a great writer who is trying something here in these White Friar books. He's trying something, and I don't really know what it is. I really didn't know what to make of The Whispering Swarm. So I will almost certainly reread The Whispering Swarm before I read this thing. In fact, I certainly will. Just to try and pick up the thread, just to try to maybe understand. If I could understand The Whispering Swarm better than I did, I might have a chance of getting this on the first try. We'll see. I don't have to get it on the first try. I can try it a few times. But anyway, that is a partial TBR, a very partial TBR for June. I think this is like the third one I've done for the month of June. But I plan on reading quite a few books in June. So a large TBR or a multiple large TBR is probably a good idea. So that's it. That's another plan for June. I'll probably do another one of these before June starts or when June begins. But anyway, those are some of the books on my mind as I am shifting my work bookcase. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.